Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brad pushed open his front door and immediately noticed the silence that surrounded him. It struck him in a strange way. He was used to hearing little feet running around the living room, overlapping voices, cartoons on TV, or the sound of Nancy complaining about something simple, like milk left out of the fridge or a pair of socks lying around. But now, there was no sound at all. It felt like time had stopped for a moment, just so he could hear the emptiness more clearly. He called out to his kids once. Then to his wife. No answer. He hurried upstairs, checked the bedrooms, the bathrooms, every corner. Everything was in order. Everything in its place. Only the people were missing. Back in the living room, he stopped in front of the dining table, where a white envelope was waiting for him, looking like it had been left there in a rush. His name was written on it in Nancy's handwriting, the same way she used to write little notes and slip them into the kids' lunch boxes. For a second, he imagined it might be something silly, maybe she'd gone out with the kids and left a note. But something about the way his stomach felt told him otherwise. It had a different weight. Brad sat down and opened the envelope. There were 2 pages inside. The first was a letter. He started reading, and within the first few lines, he felt the ground drop out from under him. Nancy said she had fallen in love with someone else. She said their 11-year relationship no longer made sense. She needed to follow her heart. But what really made Brad's blood boil was the revelation that she had taken the kids with her. Not for their safety. Not because she had to. She just wanted to start a new life, with another person. And she wanted Brad to authorize that man to become the new father to the kids. Jack Morrison. That was the name of the man who, according to Nancy, could now offer the kids a more stable life. Jack was a businessman, owner of a construction company. Successful, apparently friendly, and supposedly a great example for the kids. Brad reread that part of the letter, thinking he'd misunderstood. But it was exactly that. She wanted him to give up his status as their father, as if being a dad was an old shirt he could take off and hand over to someone else. Under the letter, there was another sheet of paper, the divorce papers. All filled out. Only his signature was missing. She'd left without talking, without facing what they were going through, without giving them a chance to discuss anything. She'd decided to vanish with everything they had built, as if 11 years were just a disposable note in a scratch pad. Brad held the papers for a long time. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. All he felt was a mix of disbelief, anger, and sadness. He thought about the nights he'd stayed awake with his sick son, about the school meetings Nancy was always too tired to attend, about the Christmases when he did everything he could to bring the family together around the table. He thought about everything he'd been to those boys, about everything he'd become for them. His head was pounding. He had no idea how things had gotten to this point. Were there signs? He couldn't tell. He didn't want to think about that now. All he could see were images of his children in their room, sleeping with their arms around each other, laughing during weekend movies. Now every memory felt ripped away. She'd taken all of it with her. She took the present, the future, and still wanted to erase the past. That adoption request was more than just a signature. It was an erasure, as though Jack could simply step into the place Brad had built through hard work, effort, and love. As if all it took was someone with more money to replace the person who stayed for the tough times. Brad wasn't going to allow that. He got up slowly, tears in his eyes, but with a clear decision in mind. He might have lost his wife, but he wasn't about to lose his children. They weren't possessions you leave behind. They were a part of him. And for them, he would face anyone. Even if it meant going up against the system. Even if Nancy had turned her back. Even if no one believed he could handle it. Brad walked out of the living room, still holding the papers, his heart in pieces, and one quiet certainty pounding in his chest: he wasn't signing anything. Brad left the house with a heavy heart. His sweaty hands still gripped the phone he'd barely touched since reading that letter. He drove on autopilot, not really thinking, until he found himself parked in front of the old bar he used to go to before he got married. It was the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions and the faces were always the same. Once inside, he recognized the muffled sound of music, the murmur of conversations, and the smell of beer mixed with fried food. Somehow, it made him feel alive, even though he was completely shattered on the inside. He headed straight to the counter and asked for something strong. He wasn't sure if he wanted to erase the pain or just needed a break from it. The drink came quickly. As he took the first sip, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. It was Peter Collins, a longtime friend he hadn't seen in months. Peter walked over, smiling, ready to crack a joke, but froze the moment he saw Brad's face. His expression said it all. Something serious had happened. And there was no need for many words to know it wasn't small. They sat together. Brad stayed quiet for a while, just staring at his glass. Peter waited. That was the kind of friendship they had, one built on respect, even in silence. When Brad finally started to speak, the words came out heavy. He told him about the letter, about Nancy's choice, about Jack Morrison, and especially about the outrageous idea that Brad should allow the adoption of his kids. Peter listened, first in silence, then shaking his head with a look that blended anger and disbelief. This went way beyond divorce. It was like someone was trying to strip away Brad's identity. Brad kept talking non-stop. He was choking on all of it and needed to get it out. He said he felt betrayed, humiliated, but most of all, torn out of his children's lives without a chance to fight. That hurt more than the separation itself. Because Nancy knew him. She knew how involved he was, how much he cared about the family, even on the hard days. And still, she had the nerve to try to erase everything with a piece of paper and a signature. Peter, who was always more direct, didn't hold back. He called Nancy a coward, said it was selfishness in its purest form, and that no matter how much money Jack had, he'd never replace the father Brad was. But the words that stuck with Brad were something simple yet spot on. If you give up now, you'll carry this weight for the rest of your life. Not because of her. Because of your kids. One day, they'll understand who stayed and who turned their back. That line kept echoing in Brad's mind. He knew Peter was right. This was bigger than wounded pride or heartbreak. It was about what he meant in his children's lives. He was their home. He was the bedtime stories, the backyard games, the advice he gave patiently, even when nobody was listening. Nancy knew that. She just chose to ignore it. As they talked, memories floated in and out like scenes from a confusing movie. Brad remembered teaching his son to ride a bike, watching his daughter's first school performance, spending weekends in the park. These were simple moments, but they were all he had now. And each one meant more than any adoption proposal or marriage to a successful businessman. None of that could be replaced. Or bought. Peter suggested he hire a lawyer, someone who knew how to handle this kind of situation. But Brad said he wasn't ready for that just yet. He needed to figure out how to move forward first. He wanted to go back to work, to live, to breathe without feeling that constant weight on his chest. He said he might have to start over from scratch. But one thing he made clear, he wasn't leaving his kids behind. When they got up to leave, Peter gave him a firm hug. One of those hugs that holds a person in place when everything else is about to collapse. Right then and there, in that quick gesture between two men marked by life's blows, Brad felt something reignite inside him. A kind of raw strength that comes when you've lost everything and what remains is sheer will, the will to fight, to resist, to rebuild. Brad left the bar with his mind still reeling, but his step more certain. He didn't know exactly what was coming, but he was sure of one thing: he would not be erased from his children's story. And nobody could take that away from him anymore. Excellent observation, my friend. You're absolutely right, it really was missing that essential point about Brad fighting for his kids, since he would never leave that unresolved while rebuilding his life. I'll rewrite the third part entirely, including that emotional and practical aspect of how he handled things legally so he could stay involved in his children's lives, without cutting off how things progress with Julie. And of course, I'll keep the same quality, flow, and rich detail. Here we go. Tom Williams's death struck like a sudden bolt of lightning. A massive heart attack while he was making breakfast. Julie, his wife, tried to revive him. She screamed, called 911, but it all happened too fast. By the time the paramedics came in, Tom's life had already slipped through her fingers. Their home, which was once full of little routines and silly jokes, turned silent. Julie spent days wandering from room to room without knowing what to do. Brad, who lived next door, watched it unfold like someone watching a heartbreaking movie. He knew what it was like for the ground to vanish without warning. He knew how silence could be the cruelest kind of noise. He started offering help gently. A plate of food, a quick trip to the store. At first, Julie just nodded a quiet thanks and disappeared again. But little by little, in a warm way that didn't crowd her, Brad stuck around. One day he mowed the lawn, which was getting out of control. Another day he fixed a leaking faucet. Julie began to accept his help. And in that silence, the two of them began to share more than chores, they began to share their grief. Meanwhile, Brad was fighting a silent battle in court. Right after talking to Peter at the bar, he did go looking for a lawyer. Someone strong and seasoned who wasn't intimidated by big names or businessmen with influence. The legal process was tough. Nancy had moved to another city with Jack and was trying to fast-track the adoption. But Brad fought every single line, standing his ground. He showed school records, photos, videos, testimonies from teachers, friends, and neighbors. He proved, with facts, that he had always been there, always been a father, and that no new relationship or bank account could change that. During the months of hearings, Brad tried to keep life as normal as possible for his kids. He called them every day, even when Nancy blocked his number. Once he got a court order through his lawyer, he was allowed supervised video calls. Every minute with them mattered. In those calls, he talked about school, their favorite shows, funny stories from when they were little. In the beginning, the kids seemed confused, but little by little, they started smiling again during the calls. Their bond hadn't vanished, it was just hurt. Brad knew that true connections endure. And he fought with dignity, without yelling, without trash-talking Nancy. He fought by being present, by staying consistent, by loving them. During that time, Julie became more than a neighbor. She was a companion, a source of affection, a comfort. She started coming to Sunday lunches, little outings, birthdays. Even with all the emotional turmoil, Brad's kids found something familiar in her. She knew how to listen, how to talk without judging, how to respect their space. Julie never tried to take anyone's place. She simply added to their lives. When the court allowed the kids to spend weekends with Brad again, Julie made sure to be there, but always in a gentle way. And they responded to her with genuine affection. At a key hearing, the judge denied the adoption request. He said that despite Nancy's new reality, Brad was a present and emotionally committed father, and giving up his children in favor of a new family structure would be an emotional wrong against them. The ruling was clear: shared custody, with Brad having the right to regular contact and to be part of all major decisions in the kids' lives. When he left the courthouse that day, Brad cried. For the first time in a long time, he felt relief. Coming home that day felt different. He found Julie cooking a simple dinner, the kids sitting around the table. Brad hugged them tight, as if trying to make up in one moment for all the lost days. His eyes met Julie's, and she understood him without him saying a word. That home, which had been so wounded by absences, was alive again. Nancy, on the other hand, carried on with Jack. But those close to the situation noticed that their marriage didn't have the sparkle she had imagined. Jack was distant, controlling. And Nancy, now away from the children part of each week, started to realize that not everything that looks shiny is gold. Brad, though he never said it out loud, knew he'd won more than just a court case. He'd proven something to himself. He hadn't allowed the pain to harden him or turn him bitter. And, without even planning it, he'd ended up creating a new home, rebuilding everything honestly, step by step. No worries, my friend. These things happen, good thing we're on the same page now. And you know what? You just gave me the perfect chance to deliver part 4 with all it deserves, Samantha's wedding, Jack's attempt to play father of the bride, Brad's unwavering stance, Julie's role in this final stretch, and of course, that surprising twist at the end that leaves everyone with chills and an unforgettable life lesson. Here's the fourth part, just how you like it, direct, deep, packed with emotion, complete beginning to end, without repeating what's already been told. Samantha was about to experience one of the most important moments of her life. Her wedding to Ethan was coming up, and with it came a mix of excitement, nerves, and an overwhelming desire for everything to go right. Brad watched each step of the preparations with a quiet sense of pride. He didn't interfere with the decisions, but he made sure he was around. Julie, as always, remained steadily supportive. She helped where she could, never overstepping. Brad's kids, now adults, were doing well, but this wedding was more than just a celebration. It was the culmination of something that once seemed impossible, a family rebuilt calmly and genuinely. On a Saturday afternoon, Nancy showed up with a proposal. She said Jack wanted to pay for everything: the venue, decorations, catering, a designer dress, professional video, luxury invitations, the whole package. The catch seemed simple to her: Jack would be introduced as the father of the bride, give the main speech, have the first dance with Samantha, and sign off as the event sponsor. Brad heard this from his own daughter during a calm conversation in their kitchen. She didn't look excited. She spoke like someone who'd been pushed into considering an option that wasn't what she truly wanted. Brad stayed silent for a few seconds. He looked at his daughter with a mix of sadness and tenderness. Then he gently held her hand and said firmly, "You know who's been here from the start. This wedding should be how you want it to be. If that means we have to cut costs, we'll cut costs. But we're not going to sell a place that was earned through love." That same night, Brad and Julie sat down with Samantha and Ethan. They looked at the household savings and showed how much they could contribute. It wasn't an extravagant amount, but it was enough for something beautiful and meaningful. Samantha got emotional. Not about the amount, but about the gesture. It wasn't about luxury. It was about belonging. The wedding took place a few weeks later in a simple venue, decorated by friends with flowers gathered from a family friend's farm. The ceremony was led by one of Samantha's former teachers, who had been like a second father to her during tough times. Brad was the one who walked her down the aisle, not Jack. It was the man who'd been there for the report cards, the feverish nights, the birthdays when her mom was missing. The man who woke up early to make breakfast and stayed up late to listen to worries. Her real father. At the reception, Jack tried to approach. He handed Samantha an envelope, offering her a generous check as a honeymoon gift. She politely turned it down, saying she preferred something with sentimental value. He insisted, with a smile that looked more like an obligation. Julie, who had been watching from a distance, stepped in. She took Samantha by the hand, looked her in the eye, and said, "Everything you need is already right here." In that moment, Jack realized he wasn't being shut out of spite. This was simply the consequence of his own choices. The party went on with soft music, good food, and genuine hugs. What could have been a flashy event became a celebration of affection. When it was time for the toast, Brad stood up. He raised his glass, looked at everyone, took a deep breath, and said, "Today, my daughter is getting married. But what moves me isn't seeing her in a white dress. It's remembering all the times she fell down and got back up again, how she showed me what real strength is, even when I thought I was the one being strong for her. This toast is for everyone who builds a family by staying, by showing up, even when things fall apart. Applause filled the room. Many had tears in their eyes. Julie was quietly crying. Samantha, blushing, hugged her father with the same force she had as a child. Nothing could top what happened next. When guests started to head out, Samantha pulled Brad aside. Shaking, she confessed she'd been keeping a secret for years. Something that weighed on her. She told him that months before Nancy left home, she had seen something no one else knew. She caught her mother kissing Jack in the car while talking about how the kids got in the way of their plans. She'd heard it with her own ears. And that was why, even though she was young and didn't fully understand, she began to distance herself from her mother. Nancy's marriage to Jack wasn't a shock to her. The real surprise was that Brad never lashed out, never spoke ill of his ex-wife, never turned the kids against her. And that made Samantha respect him even more. Brad swallowed hard. He closed his eyes for a second, as if trying to find oxygen in the middle of all that emotion. He had never imagined his daughter knew. He had no idea how much she'd kept to herself. In that second, everything fell into place. Samantha smiled and said, "You showed me what it means to be a real family. I'll never forget that." Brad smiled back. And in that smile was everything, the weight he'd carried for years, the pain of being left behind, the fear of losing his children, the legal battle, the silent sacrifices. It was all worth it now. Because he'd won, without having to defeat anyone else. And there, in that final moment of the night, he realized a deep truth: when you plant presence, you harvest belonging. And no matter how hard others may try to rewrite your story, true love always finds its way back. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.